$1.8 billion. That's hilarious. Okay, that's a lot.
New tonight, the state of South Carolina has an unusual billion-dollar money problem.
The problem is they found more than $1 billion. They just don't know how it got there.
Imagine finding an extra $1.8 billion. The state of South Carolina just did. And they have no idea how the account, nicknamed the mystery account, got there. Or who's in charge of it. What do they do with all this money?
$1.8 billion is a lot of money. South Carolina state officials found it in a mystery account this week. The discovery has leaders scratching their heads about not only its source, but where it's supposed to go.
You know, times are good in South Carolina when they got an extra $1.8 billion sitting in an account and don't know where it's from. So, welcome to South Carolina, the Palmetto State. Now, South Carolina's had a long history of accounting issues. See, the Treasurer's Office was created when the state's first constitution was written back in 1776, when it was part of the 13 colonies. Back then, the General Assembly selected the treasurer, but by the early 1800s, the state's finances were in, a quote, a state of bewildering confusion, and no one could tell the amounts of debts or credits of the state. Now, this is all according to a book, History of South Carolina, edited in 1920 by Snowden and Cutler. Okay, so how do we get here? Well, the state accountants in South Carolina went into the records to see what the hell was going on. Now, the state accountants uncovered $1.8 billion in a bank account that had gone unnoticed for 10 years. And not only do they not know where the money came from, they don't know where it's supposed to go.
Well, South Carolina has collected about $1.8 billion in a bank account over the past decade, but the state doesn't know where it came from. Right now, state and private accountants are still trying to figure out where it's supposed to go.
When most people take money out of their bank account, they generally know how much is left because there's a receipt of the transaction. Earlier this week, South Carolina lawmakers discovered just how much money was in the state's own bank account. And there's a problem. It's not just a couple $100. It's not just a couple thousand. It's $1.8 billion that nobody knows where it came from. A lot of cold, hard cash sitting in a bank account, the origins of which state and private investigative accountants are trying to determine.
Now, the state's budget is only $13.8 billion, meaning the state just found more than 10% of its annual budget in one account that they didn't even know existed.
In Columbia, House lawmakers are focusing on a new state spending plan. Debate is going on this week. South Carolina's budget was $13.8 billion this fiscal year. The proposed budget for next fiscal year, $13.2 billion. That is because money from pandemic relief and also good economic times are slowing. Despite that, the budget still contains a lot of new spending, like $200 million toward raising teacher pay, $200 million to replace old bridges across the state, and $100 million to continue income tax cuts.
Now, the state treasurer made a statement about the found manna from heaven.
The South Carolina Treasurer's Office sent us a statement which reads in part, determining the proper ownership will take time. And, quote, what's at stake is whether these funds are already committed to state agencies for specific use.
Now, South Carolina's top accountant resigned last year. His name was Richard Xtorm. Now, he stepped down after his agency started double posting money in higher education accounts. This led to a $3.5 billion error. Now, after that accounting error, the state took about a decade to transition to a new accounting system, which began, I think, in about 2007, 2008. Now, this is according to the South Carolina Daily Gazette.
And the Comptroller General, his name is Brian Gaines. So Gaines is new to the position. His predecessor stepped down just about a year ago following a major accounting error. His office admitted they had inflated the state's cash by about $3.5 billion.
The news comes following the Comptroller General's resignation last year after a $3.5 billion error. We're told that it appears the latest issue involves the Treasurer's Office. Lawmakers and the governor are waiting for a definitive report before tapping into that extra money.
Now, the issue gets a little more complicated because this is just not an accounting error. This is actually $1.8 billion of actual cash that was placed in this account. Now, lawmakers are trying to find out why the money was put there in the first place and why officials never even realized that they had this much amount of cash in this account.
It all started last April when a $3.5 billion accounting error came to light in the state's financial report. Shortly after, then Comptroller General Richard Xtorm resigned. State officials accused him of ignoring warnings from auditors about concerns with his office. Now another billion-dollar question mark. $1.8 billion found in a state bank account, and no one knows where it came from or what it was supposed to be spent on.
Now, the level of incompetence here seems to be off the charts because you would expect there to be some record of where this money came from. Some receipts, who put it in the account, is it tax money, something. But as of right now, the state absolutely does not know where a dime of this money has come from. Here is the Republican governor of the state explaining it.
Governor Henry McMaster says the news doesn't inspire confidence, but he's glad no money was lost.
That's a lot of money, and there's no need to hurry up and try to spend money. We don't know where it was supposed to go or what the purposes were supposed to be, anything else at this point. I think we need to find that out.
But now all is not lost, because even though you got $1.8 billion in an account, this account has generated $200 million of interest. Now, the Republican treasurer of the state said that, well, even though we didn't know where the money was from or why it was in this account, we invested it and we made nearly $200 million in interest for the state. But this led to more questions like, why didn't you tell any of the state senators or assembly people? Why did you tell the governor? What about the controller? No one else knew but you, and you invested it?
Loftus says he invested the money in the mystery account, making nearly $200 million in interest for the state. That led to questions about why he didn't let the lawmakers know about the money. But Loftus says it's not his job to report that information.
Communication broke down between the treasurer and the comptroller general. And it was the comptroller general who found the $1.8 billion. And this is an individual who has been appointed to that position just within the last year. So as part of his kind of getting up to speed, he's been going through the books and making sure that all the money is accounted for. And he's the one that found this additional revenue.
Well, the state treasurer, his name is Loftus, by the way. He says, well, hold on. It's not my job to tell you where the money's coming from. It's my job to invest it.
State Treasurer Curtis Loftus, who oversees and invests the state's money, says it wasn't his job to notify lawmakers about the miscellaneous funds.
I want to be part of the solution. I'm too damn old to be arguing about nothing. This 1.8 needs to get out to the people it belongs to.
Instead, he blames the Comptroller General Brian Gaines, the state's top accountant, and the South Carolina Department of Administration.
You believe that the state needs to hire forensic accountants to go back and try to figure out where this money belongs?
Well, I don't know that it's necessarily a forensic accountant, but we need to have people who are schooled in the software who can forensically look and determine certain aspects of the system to lead us to, so we can understand whether these funds actually have ownership.
Now, this started like an internal civil war between the state treasurer's office and the state controller's office. Now, the treasurer's office, run by Loftus, said that he and his staff spent thousands of hours researching the accounts, and that the controller's office refused to meet with them or share information. In one Facebook post, Loftus is asking his followers to pray for him and his staff because they are doing a tremendous amount of work, and he also is calling for the dissolution of the Controller General's office, putting them all under the treasurer's office. Now, the treasurer is in charge of investing the state's money, and the controller is in charge of figuring out what money the state has to invest. Now, the treasurer Lotus is trying to put all the blame on the controller. His name is Brian Gaines. Now, Brian Gaines just got the job, and it was Brian Gaines and the controller's office who found the crazy mystery account. While the treasurer said he always knew the money was there, but doesn't know where the money came from and doesn't know who the money should go to.
So state officials are now finger pointing because they're saying, where did this come from? So look at these two gentlemen on your screen. It seems like there was a communication breakdown between the state treasurer, you can see him there, Curtis Loftus, and the comptroller general. His name is Brian Gaines. So Gaines is new to the position. His predecessor stepped down just about a year ago following a major accounting error. His office admitted they had inflated the state's cash by about $3.5 billion.
raise several questions about what is actually going on and who is ultimately responsible.
Yeah, who is ultimately responsible, right? So for context, the state's comptroller general is like an accountant. The treasurer is more of an investor for the state. But in theory, Hannah, they should be working together. They should be holding each other accountable. So allegedly, Gaines was getting up to speed with his new job. That's when he found the $1.8 billion in what you said is called a mystery fund. Loftus says the money has always been accounted for. It was managed. It was invested in accordance with the state law. But now there's questions by state lawmakers who are saying, well, they didn't know about the money, and they're calling on both men to testify because we're seeing some finger pointing.
Now, Controller Brian Gaines responded to all that.
Gaines has been speaking to local media. He wrote in part, the fund is designated as a non-reportable fund that should always maintain a $0 balance. The $1.8 billion was never removed by the treasurer's office from the fund and assigned to the appropriate fund. The issue is, what was the source of the $1.8 billion, and in what fund does it appropriately belong?
So now, who the hell do you blame for having $1.8 billion in the account? No one knows where the money's come from. No one knows how the money got there. No one knows where the money's supposed to go. And these people's jobs are to do exactly those things. Okay, I'm going to say it. You have a state where they first started by making a $3.5 billion error, messing up all their books. Now they go and they're like, oh my God, we found an account that has $1.8 billion of extra money that we never knew about. Where's the accountability in all this? The state treasurer, he should be fired. His job should be ended because both of these errors were under his watch. As always, tell me where I'm going in the comment section. Tell me if I am being too hard on the good people of South Carolina. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe, do all that great YouTube stuff. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'm going to see you on the next one. Peace.